At my family's Easter gathering, a place card at my table read "The Failure." But before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments, because in that moment, I had a revelation that would change the course of the entire evening. I carefully smoothed the front of my pale blue dress shirt as I made my way up the winding stone walkway to my brother Victor's sprawling Tudor-style home. The crisp, early spring air in the Chicago suburb carried the sweet perfume of hydrangeas from the impeccably manicured garden beds that lined the path. I had spent what felt like hours selecting this outfit, a quiet attempt to finally appear put together, to present a version of myself that might escape my brother's perpetually critical gaze for once. "Arthur," Victor's voice boomed from the grand oak-paneled doorway, carrying with it that familiar tone of forced cheerfulness that always set my teeth on edge. "You're actually on time for a change." I managed a tight smile, my hands clutching the homemade apple pie I'd stayed up past midnight, meticulously perfecting. "Happy Easter, Vic." He leaned in for a quick, awkward side hug, careful not to disturb the perfect styling of his hair, and took the pie from me with a cursory glance. "Oh, that's charming. We have a whole spread from that artisan bakery downtown, but I'm sure someone might have a slice of this too." I swallowed down the familiar bitter sting of his casual dismissal and followed him into the house. This had been our parents' home, but Victor and his wife, Rachel, had graciously taken it over after Mom and Dad passed away. The subsequent renovations had systematically stripped away every trace of our shared childhood, replacing warm memories with sleek, modern, and utterly impersonal design choices. The house was already humming with activity. My nephew, Adam, was carefully arranging a centerpiece of lilies on the sideboard, while my niece Jessica was sprawled on a leather sofa, completely engrossed in her phone. Rachel, my sister-in-law, stood by the wet bar, already pouring herself a generous glass of scotch at barely noon. "Arthur?" She nodded in my direction, not making any move to cross the expansive room. "Drink?" "Just water for now, thanks," I replied, watching as Victor carried my pie into the kitchen and placed it on the far end of the counter, almost hidden behind an elaborate collection of store-bought desserts. "We're planning to eat in about 20 minutes, he announced to the room. "The Hamiltons and the Bakers are joining us." My stomach clenched into a tight knot. More witnesses to my annual humiliation. Victor always made a point of inviting his golf club friends to family holidays, as if our own family wasn't a sufficient audience for his displays of success. "Can I help with anything?" I asked, trailing behind Victor as he darted around the kitchen, barking orders. "No need," he said, barely looking at me. "The caterers have it all under control. Why don't you just go find your seat in the dining room? Everything is already arranged." I nodded numbly and made my way into the formal dining room. Crystal glasses sparkled in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the massive bay windows, illuminating a scene of pastel Easter perfection. The long mahogany table was a vision, adorned with intricate floral arrangements, hand-painted china, and, at each setting, a personalized place card. I began my slow walk around the table, scanning the elegant calligraphy for my name. Victor, naturally, had seated me at the far end, as distant from his own seat at the head of the table as was physically possible. I reached for the elegant cream-colored card that marked my spot. My heart stopped cold. Instead of Arthur, the card simply read, in Victor's precise handwriting, "The Failure." My fingers trembled as I picked it up, a desperate, foolish part of me turning it over, hoping for some kind of explanation on the back. There was nothing. Just those two cruel, damning words staring up at me. A lifetime of similar moments crashed over me, like a tidal wave. Victor's smug, triumphant smile when he got his acceptance letter from Yale while I stayed home to care for our father after his debilitating stroke. his wedding to Rachel, where he'd introduced me to all their friends as his bachelor brother. The condescending, pitying tone he always used when he spoke about my modest apartment or my quiet work at the local public library. "Oh, you found your seat already." I turned to see Victor's son, Adam, standing there, his dark hair falling in perfect waves just like his father's. He glanced at the card clutched in my hand, and his eyes widened for a fraction of a second before his expression settled into something unreadable, a practiced neutrality. Did you see what this says?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Adam's gaze dropped to the plush oriental rug. "I'm sure it's just Dad's weird sense of humor, Uncle Arthur. You know how he gets when he's stressed about hosting? This isn't humor, Adam. This is cruel," I said, the words feeling heavy and useless. He shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other. "I should probably go help with the flowers. The centerpiece doesn't look quite right." He hurried away, leaving me standing alone, the offensive card still clutched tightly in my hand. More guests were starting to filter in now. I could hear Victor's booming, performative laughter echoing from the foyer as he greeted the Hamiltons. My first instinct was to flee. I should just walk out that door, get in my car, and never come back. But then where would I go? Back to my quiet, empty apartment. This family, for all its toxicity and pain, was all I had left in the world. "Ah, found your place card, I see." Rachel's voice, sharp and laced with amusement, came from behind me, the scent of her scotch preceding her. "Victor thought you'd appreciate the joke." I turned to face my sister-in-law. "A joke?" She shrugged, a small, knowing smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, come on, Arthur. Don't be so sensitive. It's Easter. Lighten up a bit." "Lighten up? About being called a failure by my own brother?" Rachel took another sip of her drink, her eyes cold. "Well, it's not like it's not true, is it? 58 years old, never married, no kids, still renting that same little apartment, working at the library, shelving books." She leaned in a little closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Meanwhile, just look at what Victor's built. Look at our kids." Her words felt like a physical slap. "I gave up everything," I said, my voice shaking with a sudden surge of old resentment. "I gave up my entire life to take care of Mom and Dad. Victor was off building his perfect life, while I was emptying bedpans and managing their medications." "That's ancient history, Arthur," she said dismissively. "It's been, what, 7 years since they passed? And you're still in the exact same spot." Just then, Victor swept into the room, directing the caterers where to place the elaborate serving dishes. "Oh, good. You two are catching up. Arthur, why don't you put that place card down and help me with the napkins?" I stared at my brother, at his expensive tailored suit, his designer watch, the effortless air of success he wore like a second skin. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, of course, burning like acid in my chest. But something else was rising to meet it. Something that had laid dormant for a very, very long time. "Victor," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "What is this?" I held up the card for him to see. He glanced at it dismissively, not even breaking stride. "Oh, honestly, Arthur, it's just a little joke. Don't make a scene in front of our guests." "A joke?" I repeated, louder this time. "You think it's funny to call your brother a failure? The brother who gave up his career, his relationships, his entire future to care for our parents while you were off playing real estate mogul?" Victor's expression hardened, the cheerful host mask falling away. "That was your choice, Arthur. Nobody forced you to stay. And frankly, using that as an excuse for why your life hasn't amounted to anything is getting rather old." The room suddenly went quiet. I realized the Hamiltons and the Bakers had entered and were now watching our exchange with a mixture of discomfort and fascination. Jessica had finally looked up from her phone. Even the caterers had paused their work, their eyes wide. "Dad." Adam's voice cut through the tense silence. "That's really mean." Victor shot his son a warning look. "Stay out of this, Adam. Your uncle is just being dramatic, as usual." I looked around at the faces staring back at me. Some were embarrassed, some were curious, and a few looked like they were simply enjoying the show. For years, I had been the family punching bag, the cautionary tale, the sad bachelor brother, the one who sacrificed everything only to become nothing in their eyes. But in that moment, clutching that cruel piece of cardstock, I had a revelation that would change everything. Victor wasn't mocking me because he genuinely thought I was a failure. He was doing it because he needed me to be a failure. He desperately needed someone to feel superior to, someone whose quiet life made all his own shallow achievements seem more meaningful by comparison. And more importantly, I knew something that Victor didn't. Something that would turn his perfectly arranged Easter dinner completely upside down. "You know what, Victor?" I said, carefully placing the card back on the table beside my plate. "Let's eat. I'm starving." Victor looked momentarily confused by my sudden shift in tone, but he recovered quickly, plastering his gracious host smile back onto his face. "Yes, everyone, please take your seats. Arthur, you don't mind sitting over there, do you?" I smiled back at him. A real, genuine smile for the first time that day. "Not at all, Vic. It's the perfect place for me to watch everything unfold." He frowned slightly at my cryptic response, but quickly turned his attention back to welcoming the rest of the guests to the table. Little did he know, this Easter dinner would be unlike any other they had ever hosted. The truth I had been holding on to for years was about to come to light, and Victor's world of careful pretense was about to crumble like the shell of a decorated Easter egg. I took my designated seat at the table, the one marked "the failure," and I waited patiently for my moment. The first course arrived, a delicate spring salad with edible flowers that looked almost too perfect to eat. Victor beamed as his guests lavished compliments on his exquisite taste. I picked at my food, quietly observing the dynamics around the table. "Arthur, Mrs. Hamilton called from across the table, her voice dripping with condescension. "Victor tells me you're still at the library." How quaint to have stayed in one job for so long. Before I could even formulate a response, Victor jumped in. "Arthur has always preferred stability." The way he said the word stability made it sound like a terminal disease. "Not everyone needs to chase promotions and status," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Libraries are important pillars of the community." Victor let out that tinkling laugh he always reserved for dismissing me. "Oh, yes, of course. We're all very grateful for people like Arthur who keep our public institutions running. To the backbone of society." Rachel raised her glass with a smirk. The table chuckled, and I felt the familiar burn of humiliation creep up my neck. They weren't toasting me. They were mocking me. "Uncle Arthur helped me with my thesis research," Adam interjected suddenly, his voice clear. "He found sources online that none of my professors could locate." Victor shot his son a silencing look. "Yes, well, speaking of success, Rachel just closed that massive commercial property deal in Scottsdale." And just like that, the conversation moved on, and I was erased once again. As they droned on about vacation homes, private schools, and yacht club memberships, I watched Victor carefully. Behind his perfect host smile, I noticed the tightness around his eyes, the subtle way he kept glancing at Rachel whenever she mentioned their recent lavish purchases. During a lull between courses, I excused myself to use the restroom. I deliberately took the long way back, passing by Rachel's home office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices drifting out. It was Rachel and their daughter Jessica, locked in a heated, whispered discussion. "Mom, I can't keep lying to the bank examiner," Jessica hissed, her voice fraught with panic. "Lower your voice," Rachel snapped back. "It's just until we can secure the new investors. The properties are all underwater. If anyone looks too closely, no one will, if you just keep your mouth shut. Your father and I have everything under control." I slipped away, just as they started moving toward the door. So, the perfect facade was indeed cracking. Victor and Rachel's real estate empire was built on a foundation of sand. When I returned to the table, I watched Rachel's brittle smile as she described their planned European summer vacation in vivid detail. My mind flashed back to the cryptic text Victor had sent me last week. "Arthur, we need to have a serious family discussion at Easter. Don't disappoint us by not showing up." Now I finally understood what this dinner was really about. They needed something from me. The main course arrived, an elaborate rack of lamb that Victor made sure everyone knew had been specially imported. "Arthur," Victor said suddenly, topping off my wine glass without asking, "you've been so quiet. Why don't you tell everyone about your little hobby?" My hobby was what Victor called my volunteer work with refugee resettlement complex. Challenging work that gave my life far more purpose than Victor's golf club memberships ever could. "Actually," I said, taking a deliberate sip of wine, "I've been thinking a lot about Mom and Dad lately." Victor stiffened immediately. "Easter isn't the time for sad memories, Arthur." "Not sad," I corrected him gently. "I was just remembering how proud Dad was when I received that offer from the publishing house in New York." Victor's smile faltered. The job I'd turned down to care for our parents was a sore spot, a topic he always meticulously avoided. "That's ancient history," Victor dismissed. "Funny thing about history," I replied, looking him directly in the eye. "It has a way of shaping everything that follows." Mrs. Baker turned to me with genuine interest. "You were in publishing?" "Arthur had an opportunity once," Victor cut in quickly, "but he chose a different path. I chose family," I said simply. Dad had just had his stroke. Mom couldn't manage on her own, and Victor was busy with his new marriage. An uncomfortable silence descended upon the table. "Family always comes first," Rachel said heartily, raising her glass yet again. "Which reminds me, Victor and I have a small announcement to make." "Here it comes," I thought, bracing myself. "We're thinking of converting the old boathouse property into a family retreat," Victor announced grandly. "A place where we can all gather for holidays. We'll need all hands on deck for this project." I translated his words silently. They needed money, and they expected me to contribute. Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Adam was studying his plate with intense focus. "How generous of you to include all of us," I said carefully. Victor's eyes gleamed with a premature sense of triumph, completely misinterpreting my response as agreement. He had absolutely no idea that I had already seen through his desperate charade. More importantly, he had no idea what I had been quietly building while he was so busy looking down on me. As the dessert plates were cleared, I prepared myself. The real Easter revelation was about to begin. "Coffee in the living room," Victor announced, rising from the table with his usual practiced grace. "Arthur, would you mind giving me a hand with the cups?" I nodded and followed him into the kitchen. The moment we were alone, his friendly host facade slipped away. "You could try a little harder, you know," he hissed, violently arranging cookies on a silver tray. "The Hamiltons and the Bakers are important connections." "Important for what, Victor? For your failing business?" He froze, a cookie suspended in midair. "What are you talking about?" I overheard Rachel and Jessica. Things aren't as perfect as you're pretending, are they? Victor slammed the tray down on the marble countertop. Keep your voice down and stay out of things you don't understand. Oh, I think I understand perfectly. That's why I'm really here, isn't it? Not for a family Easter, but because you need something from me. He straightened his tie, composing himself. We're planning to discuss a family investment opportunity. And yes, as my only brother, I'd think you'd want to help, like you helped when Mom and Dad needed care. The words came out sharper than I intended, reopening a wound that had never truly healed. Victor's face hardened into a familiar mask of indignation. We had young children, Arthur. You were single, with nothing tying you down. Nothing except my dreams, my ambitions, and a job offer that would have changed my entire life. I shot back. Just bring the sugar bowl, Victor snapped, whisking the cookie tray away. Alone in the vast, silent kitchen, I leaned against the counter, my mind racing. I had spent years being Victor's doormat. The family failure, the bachelor brother who sacrificed everything and got nothing but pity in return. But what Victor didn't know, what none of them knew, was how I had spent the last 7 years since our parents had passed. I'd started small, selling handcrafted bookmarks on Etsy while still working my full-time job at the library. My literary-themed designs caught on, and soon I was shipping orders internationally. I expanded my offerings to include personalized leather-bound journals, and then rare book restoration services. Working with collectors led me to discover that I had a natural talent for spotting undervalued first editions. By the 3rd year, Blackwell's Literary Treasures had a 6-month waiting list for consultations. I'd kept my success quiet, partly because I've always been a private person, but mostly because I knew without a doubt that Victor would find some way to claim credit for it or demand a share of the profits. I carried the heavy silver sugar bowl into the living room, where Rachel was already holding court, discussing their investment opportunity in vague, grandiose terms. The lakefront property market is absolutely exploding, she was saying. With the right capital influx, this boathouse renovation could easily triple in value within a few years. Sounds exciting, Mrs. Hamilton replied, though her tone suggested she'd heard similar pitches before. Victor patted the empty seat beside him on the sofa. Arthur, come sit. This concerns you too. I sat down, arranging my face into what I hoped was an expression of polite interest. As Rachel was explaining, Victor continued, this is really a family legacy project. Something for all of us to enjoy, but also a smart investment for our futures. And how much capital are you looking for? I asked, my voice deliberately innocent. The room grew noticeably quieter. Victor shot Rachel a warning glance. Well, he cleared his throat. We're thinking of an initial investment of about $50,000 from each family member. Mr. Baker let out a low whistle. That's a substantial sum. It's an investment, Victor insisted. And you'll get family rates for using the property once it's renovated. So, it's not actually a family retreat, I clarified, letting the words hang in the air. It's a rental property that you want us to fund. Rachel's smile stiffened. Arthur, you of all people should appreciate this kind of opportunity. What with your limited resources? Where else could you possibly get this kind of return? I felt that familiar burn of humiliation, but this time it was followed by something new, a cold, clarifying anger. And what if I don't have $50,000 to invest? I asked. Victor's laugh was brittle and sharp. Oh, Arthur, please. We all know you've been squirreling away money for years. You have no expenses, no children's tuition, no mortgage, no life, is what he meant. Nothing worth spending money on. Maybe Uncle Arthur has other plans for his savings, Adam suggested quietly from across the room. Victor shot him a withering look. What plans? He's been doing the exact same thing for decades. That was the moment. That was the final push I needed. They had pushed me too far for too long. The place card was just the final, deliberate insult in a lifetime of them. Actually, I said, setting my coffee cup down on the table with deliberate care, I do have other plans. What? Victor smirked. Another library conference in Cleveland? No, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. I'm opening a rare books gallery in Manhattan next month. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. You're... what? Rachel finally managed to stammer. A gallery, I repeated calmly, for rare books and literary artifacts. I've already leased a space in Chelsea. Victor was the first to recover. That's absurd. You can't afford Manhattan real estate. You can barely afford your own apartment. I allowed myself a small smile. You'd be surprised what I can afford, Victor. Jessica leaned forward, her phone forgotten, a flicker of genuine interest in her eyes. Uncle Arthur, are you serious? Completely serious. The opening reception is on May 15th. You're all invited, of course. Victor's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. You're making this up. You're just saying this to avoid helping the family. I reached for my phone, pulled up the sleek professional website from my business, and slid it across the coffee table to Jessica. See for yourself. She scrolled through the elegant site, her eyes widening as she saw the photos of the gallery renovations, the online catalog of rare first editions, and the press mentions of Arthur Blackwell, literary antiquarian to watch. Holy, she whispered. This is totally legit. Victor snatched the phone from her hands, his expression shifting rapidly from disbelief to shock, and then to something I had never seen on his face before. Uncertainty. I don't understand, he stammered, looking from the phone to me. When did you? While you were so busy feeling superior, I said quietly. I was busy building something of my own. The Hamiltons and the Bakers exchanged glances, now clearly enjoying this unexpected turn of events far more than the polite small talk. Well, Arthur, Mrs. Baker said brightly, this is absolutely fascinating. I'd love to hear more about your gallery. And just like that, the entire gravitational pull of the room shifted. For the first time in decades, Victor wasn't the center of the conversation. His perfect Easter gathering was no longer about showcasing his success or trying to secure funding for his failing investments. As I began to describe my journey into the world of rare books, I caught Adam's eye from across the room. He gave me a small, approving smile. Victor sat frozen, his world tilting on its axis. And the bomb I had just dropped was only the beginning. I hadn't even shared the biggest revelation yet. The mood in the living room had shifted dramatically. Mrs. Hamilton was now sitting beside me on the sofa, asking detailed questions about first editions and authentication processes. Mr. Baker was discussing the potential tax advantages of investing in tangible assets like rare books. I answered their questions thoughtfully, the expertise I had cultivated over 7 years flowing naturally and easily. Victor sat rigidly on the edge of his chair, his smile frozen in a pained grimace. Rachel kept checking her phone, a visible sheen of perspiration on her forehead. Their perfect Easter gathering was unraveling before their very eyes. So this business, Victor finally interjected, his voice overly casual. It must be very small scale, a hobby shop, really. I took a slow sip of my coffee before answering. Last year, we handled the private sale of a first edition Hemingway for $340,000. Jessica nearly choked on her cookie. You sold a book for more than my condo cost? The books are just the beginning, I explained. There's a passionate market for all kinds of literary artifacts, handwritten manuscripts, authors' personal effects, tangible pieces of literary history. Blackwell's Literary Treasures, Mrs. Baker read from the website on Jessica's phone. My professional name, I said. It felt right for a fresh start. Victor stood up abruptly. Dessert. I completely forgot about the special Easter pastries. His voice was pitched too high, his movements jerky and unnatural as he fled to the kitchen. Rachel leaned forward, her tone suddenly sycophantic. Arthur, this sounds incredibly interesting. Perhaps we should discuss combining our ventures. Your book business could be a perfect addition to our boathouse project. A rare books corner in a vacation rental? I raised an eyebrow. We could position it as a literary retreat, she pressed, desperation seeping into her voice. Your expertise, our property, its synergy. I almost felt sorry for her. I don't think our business models align, Rachel, I said coolly. Victor returned, balancing an elaborate tray of pastries, his hands shaking slightly. Arthur has always been full of surprises, he said with a brittle, forced laugh. Remember when he announced he was turning down that big job in New York to stay home with Mom and Dad? We were all so shocked. I remember you being relieved, I countered quietly. You told me, thank God someone's handling it. An uncomfortable silence descended over the room once more. Well, Mrs., Hamilton said brightly, trying to break the tension. Families are complicated, aren't they? Arthur, I'd absolutely love to see your gallery when it opens. Victor's knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. For decades, he had been the successful brother, the one with the connections, the one everyone in their social circle admired. Now, his carefully constructed narrative was crumbling around him. Actually, I said, reaching for my handbag, I have something else I wanted to discuss while we're all together. Victor's eyes narrowed with suspicion. More surprises, Arthur? You could say that. I pulled a slim manila envelope from my bag. I wasn't planning on doing this today, but after seeing that place card, I think it's time. What place card? Mrs. Baker asked innocently. Victor laughed nervously. Oh, just a silly little mix-up with the seating arrangements. Dad labeled Uncle Arthur's seat the failure, Adam said, his voice flat and clear. The Hamiltons exchanged shocked glances. Mrs. Baker's mouth fell open. It was clearly a joke, Victor insisted, his cheeks flushing. Arthur knows that. Do I? I opened the envelope slowly. 7 years ago, after Mom and Dad passed, I found something while I was cleaning out Dad's old study. A collection of letters, documents, and his original, final will. Rachel sat her drink down on the table with a thud. Victor had the will. It was executed properly by the estate lawyer. Victor had a will. I corrected her. But it wasn't the final one. The room went absolutely still. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Victor's face drained of all color. What are you talking about? His voice was barely audible. I removed a folded, age-yellowed document from the envelope. Dad changed his will 3 months before he died. He was concerned about how you and Rachel were handling your money, about the risky investments, the mounting debt. That's absurd, Rachel sputtered. Your father trusted my financial acumen implicitly. Did he? I unfolded the paper. This will, his final will, left the house and half of his remaining assets directly to me, with specific instructions that they were not to be used to bail out any of your and Victor's business ventures. Victor lunged for the document. This is a fabrication. You're making this up because you're jealous of our success. I held it just out of his reach. It's certified, Victor. I've had it verified by 2 separate attorneys. Then why wait 7 years? Rachel demanded, her voice rising. If this were real, you would have contested the estate immediately. I almost did, I admitted, my voice quiet but firm. But then I thought about what Dad would have wanted. He valued family peace above everything else. So, I decided to make my own way, to build something for myself without relying on any inheritance. How noble, Victor sneered, though his voice quavered. It wasn't about nobility, I said. It was about self-preservation. I needed to prove to myself, and only to myself, that I wasn't what you always said I was. I wasn't a failure. Jessica looked from her father to me, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. So, this house, it's actually yours? Legally, yes, but I've never had any intention of claiming it. Then why bring this up now? Victor demanded. I carefully refolded the document. Because I am tired of being treated like a charity case in my own family, especially when you're the ones who have been living in a house that rightfully belongs to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Victor stared at me as if he were seeing a stranger, and in many ways, he was. The docile, self-sacrificing brother he had taken for granted for so long no longer existed. I don't want the house, I continued, my voice steady. What I want is respect, and I want an apology. An apology for years of condescension and for today's deliberate public humiliation. Victor's lips pressed into a thin white line. Rachel looked physically ill. The Hamiltons and the Bakers were watching the entire exchange with undisguised fascination. If this is true, Rachel finally said, her voice barely a whisper, you could have evicted us at any time. I could have, I agreed. But unlike some people, I don't measure my own worth by how much power I can hold over others. In that moment, looking at Victor's stunned, pale face, I realized something profound. I was free. I was free from needing his approval. Free from the crushing burden of being the family failure. Free from the shadow that had followed me for decades. And Victor, for perhaps the first time in his entire adult life, was completely and utterly speechless. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 6 times, each gong breaking the suffocating silence in the room. The Hamiltons and the Bakers exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly uncertain whether they should stay for the rest of the unfolding family drama or attempt to make a polite exit. Perhaps we should be going, Mrs. Henderson began, half rising from her seat. No, please stay, Victor said quickly, his social mask sliding back into place with a visible effort. This is all just a simple misunderstanding between brothers. Is it? I asked quietly, because it seems pretty clear to me. Rachel cleared her throat. Arthur, perhaps we should discuss this matter privately. Why? I countered. You were perfectly fine with humiliating me publicly. I turned my attention toward our guests. I sincerely apologize that you've all been drawn into this. Actually, Mr. Baker said, setting down his coffee cup with a decisive click, I find it rather refreshing. Too many families hide their dysfunction behind closed doors. Victor let out a strangled sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. Dad, Adam said, his voice gentle but firm, I think you owe Uncle Arthur an apology. Victor's head snapped toward his son. Excuse me? The place card was cruel, Adam continued, unwavering. And from what I'm hearing, it's just part of a much larger pattern. Jessica, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Is that why Grandpa changed his will? Because of how you treated Uncle Arthur?" Victor's face flushed a deep crimson. "Your grandfather was confused in his final months. Your uncle has clearly taken advantage of that." "Stop it, Victor," I interrupted suddenly, my patience finally exhausted by the decades of his lies. "I have the letter Dad wrote explaining his decision. Would you like me to read it aloud?" Victor's mouth snapped shut. I pulled another document from my envelope. "This is just between us," he whispered, slumping slightly in his chair. "You've made your point." Rachel, however, wasn't ready to surrender. "If this is some kind of blackmail attempt to get us to invest in your little bookshop gallery," I corrected her smoothly, "and I don't need your investment. My business secured its Series A funding last month. Our current valuation is $12 million. Rachel's jaw literally dropped. Jessica let out a low whistle of disbelief. "That's impossible," Victor muttered. "You're a librarian." "I was a librarian," I clarified. "Now I'm the founder and CEO of a rapidly growing literary auction house and authentication service." Mrs. Baker leaned forward, a new and entirely different kind of interest in her eyes. "12 million? Arthur, you simply must tell me who handled your funding round. My own son's tech startup is looking for investors. For the first time in our adult lives, I watched my brother Victor experience something he had never known before. Irrelevance. The spotlight had shifted completely away from him, and he had absolutely no idea how to reclaim it. "There's more?" I said, turning my attention back to Victor and Rachel. "Dad left me something else. A letter, explaining exactly why he changed his will." I unfolded a yellowed page covered in our father's distinctive, elegant handwriting. "My dearest Arthur," I began to read, "if you are seeing this, it means I have passed on and you have discovered the changes I made to my will. I need you to understand why." Victor stood up abruptly. "This is a private family business." "Sit down, Victor," I said firmly. "You've controlled the narrative for long enough." To my utter surprise, he sank back into his seat. "For years," I continued reading, "I have watched you sacrifice your own dreams to care for your mother and for me. Your brother Victor has always taken what he wanted from life, but you, Arthur, have always given what was needed. He may appear successful on the surface, but I fear his foundation is built on sand." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. Victor stared intently at the floor. "The house should rightfully be yours," I read. "But knowing you, you may choose not to contest Victor's claim. If that is your decision, I respect it. But please know this. Your mother and I were always proudest of you, not because of what you achieved, but because of who you are." My voice cracked slightly on the last few words. I carefully refolded the letter, slipping it back into my bag. "Dad knew," I said softly. "He knew what you did with the will, Victor, but he also knew that I wouldn't fight you for it." "Why not?" Jessica asked, her curiosity genuine. "Why would you let them have everything?" I considered her question for a moment. "Because I needed to prove something to myself, that I could build a life without riding on anyone's coattails or depending on an inheritance." "So noble," Victor muttered, but there was less venom in his voice now, only a weary resignation. "Not noble," I corrected him. "Necessary. For my own peace." Adam stood up and crossed the room to sit on the arm of my chair. "I think what you did was incredibly brave, Uncle Arthur. Building something from nothing like that." Victor's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with hurt at his son's apparent betrayal. "It wasn't nothing," I said. "I had an education, experience, and a set of skills. Many people start with far less than that." "And now?" Rachel asked. her business mind clearly calculating the new landscape. "What do you intend to do with this information about the will?" The question hung in the air. It was the moment of truth. I could demand the house, force them out, expose Victor's deception to everyone in their carefully curated social circle. I looked around the room, at the cold, impersonal renovations that had erased our childhood memories, at Victor's desperate, fearful expression, at the curious faces of the Hamiltons and the Bakers. "Nothing," I said finally. "Nothing?" Victor echoed in disbelief. "I don't want the house, Victor. I've built my own life, my own success. What I want is acknowledgement. I want the truth. After decades of being treated as less than, I want you to admit what you did." The room held its breath. Victor looked trapped, his carefully constructed world collapsing in on him. "Victor," Rachel murmured, her voice soft. "Just tell him." He looked at his wife with an expression of profound betrayal. Then his eyes met mine, brother to brother, for the first time without the facades and pretenses. "I took it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I found Dad's new will in his desk after the funeral, and I hid it." Adam gasped softly. The confession hung in the air, stark and irreversible. "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Victor's perfect composure finally cracked. "Because I was drowning," he said, tears welling in his eyes, spilling down his cheeks. "The business was failing. We were leveraged to the hilt. I couldn't bear the thought of losing everything while you judged me with that quiet superiority of yours." The words burst out of him in a torrent of long-suppressed resentment. "You and your noble sacrifices, your simple life. Everyone always admired you for it, even while they were pitying you. Don't you see how maddening that was?" And finally, after all these years, I understood. Victor hadn't hated me for being a failure. He had hated me for possessing the one thing he never could: authenticity. A heavy silence settled over the room following Victor's confession. Tears streamed down his face, his perfect grooming now a forgotten relic. For the first time in our adult lives, I was seeing my brother without his carefully constructed mask, vulnerable, frightened, and profoundly human. "I think we should be going, Mrs. Henderson finally said, gathering her purse. The Bakers nodded in agreement. "Yes, of course," Victor responded automatically, years of social training kicking in despite his emotional state. "Thank you so much for coming." The goodbyes were awkward, but mercifully brief. Within minutes, only the family remained in the tense quiet of the living room. Rachel looked shell-shocked, alternating between checking her phone and staring blankly at the wall. Adam sat close to me, a silent show of support, while Jessica hovered near the doorway as if planning her escape. "So, what happens now?" Rachel finally asked, her voice hollow. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the immense weight of the moment. This crossroads had been decades in the making. Whatever I decided here would forever change the landscape of our family. "Victor," I said quietly, "do you remember what Mom used to say about holding grudges?" Victor looked up, surprise flickering across his tear-stained face. "That they're like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." I nodded. "Exactly. Are you saying you forgive me?" Victor sounded incredulous. "Just like that? After everything I did?" "Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past," I said. "It's about refusing to let it control the future." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "I'm not saying what you did was okay. It wasn't. But I'm tired of carrying this poison between us." "So you'll just forget it all?" Rachel asked suspiciously. "No," I said firmly. I won't forget. And there need to be changes, real ones. Victor wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, smudging his perfect composure even further. What kind of changes? First, the truth. No more pretending. No more of this family failure narrative. Victor nodded slowly. And the house? The will? The house isn't what matters to me, I said, but honesty does. If you want to continue living here, we need to formalize it. A proper agreement, acknowledging that I am legally allowing you to remain in a property that is rightfully mine. Rachel stiffened. You want us to be your tenants? I want clarity. I corrected her. And boundaries. No more taking advantage. Victor's shoulders slumped in defeat. We can't afford to buy you out. I'm not asking you to, but I am asking for your respect. And the boathouse project, Rachel ventured, is off the table, I said firmly. It was clearly just a scheme to get money from family members. Jessica let out a loud exhale. Thank God. I told them it was a terrible investment. What about your gallery opening? Adam asked quietly. Will we still be invited? I looked at my nephew, at the genuine interest in his eyes. Of course, all of you. I don't know if I can face your success, Victor admitted, his voice small. Not after everything. That's your choice, I said. But I'd rather move forward than stay stuck in our old destructive patterns. Victor looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. When did you get so wise? A small smile tugged at my lips, probably while everyone was underestimating me. To my surprise, a broken, watery laugh escaped Victor's lips. I deserved that. Yes, I agreed gently. You did. Rachel cleared her throat. So, what about our financial situation? We're still in trouble. That's not Arthur's problem, Adam said sharply, surprising everyone. No, it's not, I agreed, but I can recommend some legitimate financial advisors who might be able to help you restructure your debts. Victor stared at me in wonder. You would do that after everything? I'm not doing it for you, I clarified. I'm doing it for me, because I don't want to live with this resentment anymore. I stood up, suddenly eager to leave this house and its suffocating memories behind. I should go. It's been a long day. Victor rose too. Arthur, He stopped, seeming at a loss for words. Then, to my complete astonishment, he stepped forward and embraced me in an awkward, clumsy hug. I'm sorry, he whispered. Truly sorry. I stiffened at first, the unfamiliar contact feeling foreign. But then I slowly, cautiously returned the hug. It was uncomfortable, but also strangely healing. I know, I said simply. As I gathered my things to leave, Adam approached me. I'd love to see your gallery sometime before the opening. Maybe we could have lunch? I'd like that very much, I replied, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. Jessica shuffled forward. The gallery sounds really cool, Uncle Arthur. Maybe I could, I don't know, help out somehow? I'm pretty good with computers. I studied my niece, seeing past the privileged exterior to someone who was perhaps searching for her own purpose. Come by next week. We'll talk. Rachel remained distant, offering only a curt nod as I passed. Some bridges would take longer to rebuild, if they ever could be. At the door, Victor stopped me one last time. The place card, he said quietly. It was a cruel and childish thing to do. I wanted to hurt you because I was afraid you'd see right through me. I know, I replied. You're not a failure, Arthur. You never were. I smiled. A genuine, unburdened smile that felt like a release. No, I'm not. And I never needed you to tell me that. but it's nice to hear it anyway. Stepping outside into the cool evening air, I took a deep, cleansing breath. The weight I had carried for decades, the resentment, the hurt, the constant need for validation, felt lighter somehow, almost gone. Tomorrow, I would return to the preparations for my gallery. I would continue building the life I had chosen for myself, a life not defined by my brother's judgment or my parents' legacy, but by my own values and my own choices. I walked to my car, turning once to look back at the grand house. Victor stood in the doorway, watching me, a complex mixture of emotions playing across his face. I raised my hand in a small wave, and after a moment's hesitation, he returned it. Some wounds might never fully heal, but the poison of silence and resentment had finally been drawn out. The table card marked "The failure" had led to an unexpected triumph, the freedom to be myself, completely and without apology. As I drove away from my childhood home, I wasn't leaving with bitterness or regret. I was moving forward with something far more valuable, the quiet, unshakable power of a man who had finally claimed his own worth. The sun was setting as I reached the highway, casting long shadows across the road ahead. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what lay in the darkness. I had built a light of my own, and it would guide me home. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.